Hello, my name is Paul Stewart and I'm in Sydney, which for my international subscribers is just north of Wollongong. And later today I'm travelling to Hong Kong with Qantas and the Boeing 787 Dreamliner in business class. As you can see behind me, the sun is coming up, as is my appetite, so let's head over to the terminal and grab some breakfast. Here we are inside the terminal where Qantas have set up these self-check-in thingies, which actually gave us a preview of what our aircraft looked like, although I hadn't had any coffee yet and figured it would be easier to visit the traditional check-in counters. Then it was through the Express Pass, which actually has just been refurbished and reopened only last week. Once you clear customs, it's up the escalators and turn left. Straight in there is the first class lounge, and there's a separate video on my channel showing you there. On this trip, I kept walking around to the business lounge. Here we are inside the lounge, and it's, to be frank, one of Qantas's weaker business class lounges around. It was meant to be refurbished this year, although that has since been delayed, which is a pity as it's absolutely nothing like the brilliant lounges in Brisbane, Hong Kong, London and others. Having said that, there is barista coffee and this long table where drinks are available to pour yourself, as well as breakfast of the day, which started at 8 AM. Other than that, there's these two self-serve buffets, which are on par with most international business lounges. I had a quick bite and a coffee and then went to explore the showers. They provide running water and would be brilliant on a long layover after a long haul flight, although there's no hiding the fact that the decor was clearly inspired by a 1960s nursing home. It is now 8 AM, so I managed to snag the breakfast, which, well, can be best described as very healthy. My aircraft was due to arrive shortly from Hong Kong, so I found out which gate it was coming to, and I went for a walk. Qantas only recently, well, 2 years ago, introduced the 787 Dreamliner, with the apparent plan being to replace the aging fleet of 747s. Obviously, it has a lot less seats, so the idea is to have more of them flying routes more regularly, which is great if you're less flexible with timings. As well as introducing new seating, the 787's biggest selling point in my mind is the higher relative cabin pressure and humidity. As much as I love the 747 and the 777, after 12 hours in them, my nose and throat are incredibly dry, and that's because they're made of metal which would rust with too much moisture in the air. The 787, on the other hand, is made of clever composites, so you don't have to worry about rust. There's still a few Qantas 747s remaining, although they'll all be retired by the end of 2020. Boeing offer a Rolls-Royce or General Electric engine options on the 787, and luckily for Qantas, they've selected the latter, as Rolls have been having huge issues with their engines. By the way, they're not actually running yet, and the fans are just being blown by the wind. Here's a shot of 3 Qantas jets next to each other, which really highlights the new livery. The most distant two are the newest, and you'll note the new text on the side, and the tail includes some silver, and the Kangaroo looks a little cleaner and no longer has any paws. As you can imagine, the internet was furious, as it usually is about most things, that the Roo's paws had been chopped off, but I must admit, I don't mind. Comment below if you're a fan or not, as this is the internet. Before I forget, if you enjoyed travelling and aviation, please check out my channel for many more similar videos. Feel free to subscribe and click the notification bell, as I have many more videos coming soon. And of course, being the millennial that I am, I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, so please validate me by checking those out as well. Boarding began and my seat 6K was in the first of 2 business cabins where all the seats are in a 1-to-1 layout. Here's a quick shot of the second, slightly smaller business cabin. If you're travelling as a couple, there is this divider which you can lower if you have to. The A330 has a very similar seat, but it has a fixed larger barrier, which may or may not be a good thing. The window seats all alternate between being closer to the window and closer to the aisle. My seat was one of the ones that's closer to the aisle, and as you can see in this comparison, it's more exposed, although it's still much more private than the older 2-to-2 layouts. I'll show you around this seat in more detail, and you'll notice that there's a lap/seat belt, which means that you can recline the seat a little during takeoff and landing. To your side is a reading lamp, somewhere for your noise cancelling headphones, and a bottle holder. You've also got this storage space, which is fairly secure and well sized for the amenity kit, passport, small tablets and phones. There's also the usual power plugs, and below that is a TV, screen remote and a mirror. Here's the seat adjustments, which work really well, allowing you to select a few preset shapes or adjust however you want to. There's a fold-out table, which is reasonably solid, and if you drop your armrest, you'll be able to sneak out even during meal service. And here's the infamous Dreamliner windows, which I'll comment on later, and something I really appreciate are the overhead air vents. It seems in a lot of modern airliners, they seem to run with very warm cabins, so the option of the extra airflow is a really good thing. There's a magazine holder on your right, and straight ahead is your Inflight Entertainment touchscreen, which I'll also comment on later, and below that is the foot recess. Some people do find these a little narrow, and if you're one of those, try and select the bulkhead seats, so row 1 and 10, as the recess is wider, as you can see here. And I always forget one thing on the seat tour, and here it is. There's more storage down near your knees. And finishing off with a fantastic view of the wing and engines. Drinks were offered, and I went with the champagne, followed by a look at the amenity kit. As always, I'll be running a giveaway where you can choose either this or a pair of Qantas pyjamas. Unfortunately, this was a day flight, so they weren't actually offered, but I do have a pair sitting around anyway. Details of the competition later, although I must admit I'm a little disappointed that they no longer proactively offer them, as 8 hours is still pretty long, and being able to arrive fresh, including in clean clothes, and being ready to go is kind of the whole point of business class. I suspect it's cost cutting, which I'll comment on later as well. The wind was playing havoc today, with wind gusts up to 65 km an hour, so the airport was using its single runway 25, which was a novelty for me as I had never taken off from it, although it meant that we had to join a pretty long queue, as you can see in this footage and on my phone. It was eventually our turn to take off, and unfortunately and annoyingly, the reflection wasn't great, so I'll speed up through the takeoff and upload the full footage on my second channel, Paul Stewart Extra, and a link to that will be in the video description below. Almost immediately after takeoff, the windows were automatically darkened, which I thought was pretty odd for a flight leaving at 10 in the morning. Thankfully, they weren't locked, and a few of us opened them up to enjoy the view. Now, I can understand people wanting to darken the cabin to allow sleep on flights crossing time zones, but this was a morning flight to Hong Kong, where we arrive in the evening, so why would you want to sleep during the day? Anyway, a round of room temperature nuts were offered and a drink. I was offered two in fact, which was a Chardonnay and a cocktail called Lychee Ginger Sunset, which tasted great. The lunch service shortly began, and my starters were prawn and corn fritters with tomato and cucumber salsa served with some bread and greens. For the main, I had a shanshi, which I'm sure I'm pronounced wrong, style Humpty Doo barramundi with seasonal greens, sesame seeds and jasmine rice, which all tasted really good. For dessert, I went with a chocolate bread and butter pudding with mascarpone washed down with dessert wine. After lunch, I settled down to watch one of the most iconic TV series of our time, and again be disappointed by the bizarre non-ending ending. I can't for the life of me understand what they were thinking by generating these amazing rich storylines only to just end it all in a rush. But anyway, seeing the beautiful Australian coastline turn my frown upside down and entering foreign airspace made this flight start to feel international. There are 3 toilets for the 42 business passengers, so I never had to wait long. In fact, I don't recall having to queue at all. Now, apologies for the autofocus issues, as I'm increasingly suspect I'm going to have to sack my Fujifilm and go back to Sony, as their autofocus and stabilization seemed considerably superior. The views over the Indonesian archipelagos were impressive, and I really enjoy seeing new places and countries from 40,000 feet, with a particular highlight being Antarctica a few years ago on a flight to Johannesburg. Now, if you look closely, and I admit this isn't going to become a Windows wallpaper, but there's actually an active volcano in the distance. Please comment below if you can identify which one it is, as I think it was just east of Manado in Indonesia. As I had a bit of work to do, an espresso was delivered and a few biscuits, or cookies for those watching in America, because you guys call scones biscuits, as I discovered earlier this year when I'd visited DC and was thoroughly confused. This was followed by a dessert snack, and then I settled down to watch a movie. Here's a look at the Inflight Entertainment, which was pretty good. The touchscreen worked most of the time, except for now when I was wanting to show you a tour of my seat. It's a great option if this is the first time you're using it, unless of course you've seen the tour in these videos. There was a decent selection of movies, and as you can see, the screen quality was pretty good. Another feature I really like is these moving maps where you can see your aircraft and the terrain you're flying over. Years ago they were pretty rubbish, although in modern times the view is really quite high definition and you can really make out the places out of the window. There's also a fair few TV series to watch, including this rather disappointing one, including a final season that really should have gone for more than 6 episodes. Another thing I really like about these seats that I forgot to mention before is the raised footrests. I'll mention these windows, which on one hand are really good because they're massive and provide a really good view. Unfortunately, they don't have the traditional plastic window shades, which means that they can be controlled centrally and locked closed by the crew. As I mentioned before, these were closed shortly after takeoff, although fortunately they weren't locked as I've had on previous flights, so a few of us could open them again. Considering the fact that it was a day flight, I just can't understand why they were darkened, and then the cynic in me suspects that it was with the hope of passengers sleeping because they're easy to look after. Having just returned from London and struggling with jet lag as I edit this video, I can't understand why anyone would want to sleep during the day, only to then try and sleep again that same evening. Anyway, here's the seat in a few different positions. First up, it's fully upright, followed by a slight relaxation, which you're allowed to use during takeoff and landing in conjunction with a lap-sash seatbelt. I find this a particularly useful perk if you're stuck in taxiing for 30 minutes like we were during this flight, as it's far more relaxing than bolt upright. Then of course it folds fully flat, and there's this thin mattress cover is also provided, although I'm not sure it provides any noticeable difference. The foot recesses is fairly average in width, and there's not much room to flex your knees if you sleep on your side. Before we arrive into Hong Kong, there was a very light meal service consisting of this beef koftas with chickpea, mint, parsley salad and cucumber yogurt. It tasted fine, although I can't but help think that for an 8-hour flight in business class from mid-morning until the evening, it really should have had 2 decent meals. As you can see by my British Airways Concorde watch, it was after 7 PM Sydney time, so surely a full dinner service would have been reasonable. I must admit that I did arrive feeling fairly hungry, especially after I was unable to stomach that healthy breakfast bowl of greens in the lounge beforehand. I'll briefly mention the Wi-Fi, which didn't exist. This was followed up by a wet towel, the only one for the flight, which I'm sure is less than I've had in the past, and a Qantas themed fantail chocolate, which are objectively the best tasting lollies or candies known to humanity. The trivia question was who designed some of the crockery in the Qantas 787, which was exciting. Presumably it's the guy who decided that these dark stains on the nuts bowl look good, and yes, that's actually intentional. They have been washed, although I wonder how many passengers have suspected otherwise. Anyway, our descent into Hong Kong began with some awesome views of this General Electric Gen X engine. Before I conclude, a reminder about my giveaway where you can select either the amenity kit or a pair of Qantas Business PJs. Simply comment below, including the text giveaway in brackets, and after a month I'll select a winner and put them in the mail. Don't forget to click the thumbs up button and subscribe as well. Also make sure you keep an eye out on my channel and Instagram pages, as some of the previous giveaways have gone unclaimed. So to summarise everything, it's a perfectly good business class product. The crews are really good, and I really enjoy the down-to-earth interactions I have with Qantas crews. I find some crews on other airlines quite subservient, and it's like they're terrified of premium passengers that may be unhappy, so I really like that the Qantas interactions are where they come to you from the same level. I suspect this is a reflection of Australian society in general, where we're much less hierarchical than others, which I think is a really good thing. The food was fine, although there just wasn't enough of it. They do offer snacks between meals, although they're just packets of chips and fruit and things. Qatar Airways, on the other hand, offer impressive snacks like burgers and chips as snacks between meals. Like I said before, an 8-hour business flight over lunch and dinner time really should include 2 decent meals. Remember that once you include transiting through immigration and getting to your hotel, it's going to be 8 or 9 PM before you're able to start finding somewhere to eat. The seat itself is really good. It offers good privacy, space and storage, although I'm only 180 centimeters and I can imagine a larger and longer frame feeling quite tight. I flew with Cathay last weekend on board their 777 in their business suite, which offers a fantastic amount of space in comparison, and the review of that will be on my channel soon. The 787 itself is a great aircraft, and I certainly noticed the increased humidity, and some of the crew also mentioned that they find it more comfortable than the older 747s. Anyway, overall it was a great flight, and I'll happily fly Qantas again. In fact, I am, as I've just booked flights to Santiago, and I'm sure that will make for some interesting videos in the future. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and check out my channel for more similar aviation content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you another time.